Hello and welcome to Adviser Toolkit. I'll start with explaining the problem that we are seeking to solve. And there you can see a list of commercial insurance types. It's quite a long list. There may be a few extras to add into that, but clearly there's a lot of data that needs to be managed if you're going to manage all of those insurance types. And at the moment that's done with a questionnaire nightmare. What you see in the background there is tiles of every page of a typical broker's field questionnaire for a new client and even a renewal client. There are actually 10,000 plus possible data points if you cover the entire product range. That example there is 60 plus pages and is still incomplete. You only need a small percentage of those questions answered. And you don't know which percentage for sure until you see the client. Now, traditional databases can't cope with that kind of data management, and this data management is comparable to medical records. So for many, many years, for decades in fact, medical records have been run on a different kind of database because, as you can imagine, they've got to cover everything from a cataract to an ingrown toenail, and any individual population member on those records is probably only going to have, a cataract and ingrown toenail, not the majority of the medical conditions that could be recorded. So we've used a very different kind of database, similar to medical records, because that's the obvious comparison. So our Adviser Toolkit starts with an interview, which is adaptive for any business and any risks. That's saved in a database, which means the information's ready for next year, and it produces proposal forms which are suitable for any product included. So what I'll do is I'll jump into an example of a questionnaire that we have already prepared for Spacely Sprockets. And there's a broking system reference number there which ensures that we can integrate any of this data through API with other legacy systems. And we've entered some basic details here. And then when we answer this question, which is, are you confident with your insurance requirements? If we say no, then that takes us to our blueprint routine, which very, very quickly, in literally 2 or 3 minutes, designs an ideal program for that particular client after answering about 10 questions or so. But we'll say yes and get into the actual interview side of things. And you can see we've selected quite a lot of cover here. Those basic insurance cover, that list is all programmed in this form, and these additional cover required selection boxes will be programmed in the next few months after release. And if you selected another, for example, if they were a cargo carrier, which they're clearly not, but if you selected that, that would add just the questions required in addition to the information already collected across these other questions. And if you take something out, similarly, it just removes the questions. So you actually get an entire questionnaire with only the questions required, and they only appear once. So the perfect questionnaire for this client. And we move down and we can see we can add multiple entities. Every time you see a plus, you can keep adding entities. And there's some caps on those, but they're there just as a convenience. Really, if we took the caps off, you could enter additional information infinitely. I think we've left the cap at about 10 entities on this. You can include uninsured working expenses. Because we've selected business interruption, that's why that question appears. If we hadn't selected business interruption as a cover, this question would not appear. Then moving down, it covers everything that an insurer is going to want to know for all of those, to price and will quote all of those covers. There's claims history collected. Now, you don't have to answer any of these questions. If an advisor who's qualified judges that the answer to that question is not going to affect the outcome of this investigation and transaction, they can be left blank. It won't demand that you answer it. But a broking group might want to set some of those questions to compulsory because to supervise their sales force. And so we can turn off and on compulsory completion on any question that you see here. And you see it even goes into dual payroll basis for business interruption, which is something that can be a real nightmare to try and calculate, and it actually calculates those numbers for you. And on we go. You can collect key staff details, which is a requirement for professional indemnity and management liability. If neither of those covers were selected, we would not be being asked for the details of the key staff. There's the location, the main location where the client works from, collects all the details. If we weren't insuring property, if this was a liability only risk, we would not be being asked for the values of the property, but we would be asked for details of the construction, etc., for the liability aspect of it. We can add multiple locations. We can add multiple mobile property. We can add multiple products. So this client has 2 products. We've split them because as an advisor we've judged that the work that he does in aviation components down here may be rated differently to his main product. So we've entered 2 products, and you can basically split that up how you like, and you can keep entering products. It'll collect the revenue, historical and future, split by jurisdictions around the world, but importantly all the addition of those revenues, the application of the gross profit percentage is all done for you for calculating the business interruption policy. It means there'll be consistency between all the numbers instead of completing separate application forms where you might find that the revenue numbers reported on the product application aren't matching up with the business interruption. Well, that will never happen because you're actually going and feeding off the source data. Motor vehicles, you can add motor vehicles. Travel, we've added some travel. Cargo, and you'll see that you can select which voyage types are going to be insured. If you don't select a voyage type, if you deselect import, it won't ask about import voyage. It's got room for separate valuation basis for each different leg, so it's a full cargo application. You can add as many jurisdictions as for tax purposes the client works in, so for stamp duty and FSL. You can add current policies. This might be a client you're attacking or trying to move over, so you can add client existing policies, and you can upload a schedule of the policy. And there are other upload fields dispersed through this form. For example, you can upload claims history, you can upload the CV of an important staff person, and then once you save that, you can then go into the record and produce a record of interview. That reports every line where there's been a response. You can then turn that into a PDF. You can get that signed by the client. There's lots of electronic signature routines available on app stores for signing on a touch screen. And eventually we'll be adding our own little version of that so the client can just sign right on the dotted line on the computer if you've got a touch screen. That's the record of interview, and then we'll go back and eventually we'll have it, well, shortly we will have it so that you can go into these forms without going back to the menu. Now we're going to build some application forms. We click this button here to say that we're going to check them before we send them to insurers. And then we can select application forms and package them up how we like, but first I'd like to show you the appointment of advisor form. So we've built that in. So your pitch could be, We've done business a lot easier today. We haven't had paperwork strewn all over the desk, and we've done this neatly and tidily without bothering you with multiple completion of different application forms. So rather than go back to the way things used to be done, would you like to do business this way? And if they say yes, we can type in, this is an editable field here because it may be someone different who needs to sign the form, not the person you've done the interview with. So you've got a facility to put any name you want on that letter of appointment, and you just PDF that letter of appointment, and there you have it. There's a note there to say that this document will be as valid as business letterhead. The current policies get reported along with the claims history, so you can do your proper investigations and you can have the client sign there and become appointed on the spot. And then once that's happened, or if you just want to go ahead and quote, you can build an application form based on the product you think you need. So we might say we're going to do property loss and business interruption and breakdown on one policy. We're not on a business package. We're not going to include public liability in this instance because we think we might need to go, or we want to go and get a standalone liability. It's entirely up to the advisor's judgment how they're going to be packaged. Now, within this preview, you will see there's area then to enter things like the excesses and things that are specific, that don't relate to the information of the client's risk, but actually relate to specifics of the policy to be applied for. You see a sublimit. Accidental damage sublimit is a discretional limit. It's not, whereas the value of a building or the value of contents is a known and doesn't have any discretion. Those are reported there. Discretionary limits are entered in onto the application form. There's the property section, the mobile property section. Business interruption, it actually calculates your sum insured for you, allows you to add in other sublimits that you think are required, so additional costs of working. And if a sublimit isn't actually listed here, you can press this, or a limit or sublimit, you can press this button and you get to free text type any sublimit or limit that you want to add. So you can handle all sort of exotic sublimits. Moving on down, that's basically the form. Once you've done a bit of entry there, you click on the print icon, which actually creates a PDF. Once again, you can get that electronically signed. You can see the system works very quickly. That's a feature of the special data, or the different database that we've used, the modern style of database. You can get that signed and send that off to insurers. This, on release, we'll be doing paper or PDF application forms. You could hand that to an assistant who could much more easily enter that data into e-business. But obviously all of this information is in a database with a API, REST API, Graph API, which is the new one developed by Facebook. And so basically you can integrate all this information so that the broking system and quote software can be updated automatically, and building those bridges has never been easier. Additional features is this blueprint function, which I'll demonstrate separately just for time reasons, but you enter about 10 pieces of information. It lists the products the client should be contemplating as a suggested program. Leads, we can so we just go back. There's Open API and data usage. Who knows what other use this data could have. Now we're going to use this to generate leads for advisors. There'll be a link that's provided on the advisor's dashboard, and they can place that on their own broker site, or say under a little image on a referrer's site saying free insurance assessment here, or an email campaign offering an insurance assessment. once the client, and these questions are easily answered by clients, it's just basic information they would know about their business. They receive a report on the insurance program that is ideal for them. They can click through for implementation, and then that click through is delivered as a lead to the advisor's dashboard. So in terms of a value checklist for a purchaser, it's got to cover savings, revenue and blue sky, and you need to tick in at least one of those boxes to justify the purchase of a new system, and we've got to tick in all of those boxes. Savings, this is based on a reasonable size brokerage, so let's say 20,000 client prospect count per year. If you have 5 minutes less support staff interaction on each of those prospects or clients, that equates to 60 less support positions. If you have 5 minutes less time per interview, that equates to either 60 advisor positions or 1,000 additional prospects as a capacity. And 5 minutes saving is not difficult to contemplate when you see how much time you're saving on filling in those forms the old way. Revenue per annum, one additional cover, because you're running the blueprint, or you have the option of running the blueprint. It's a perfect way to sell an additional policy, and at only $300 revenue for an additional cover, which is really a small policy plus a reasonable broker fee. If you sell one per 5 clients, you've made $4 million. If you are more likely to be appointed as an advisor 10% of the time, that's about $3 million additional revenue. Blueprint leads, if you receive 100 a month, which is not difficult to imagine when you've got a substantial database already or client base already, that's approximately 1.5 million annual income. And you might also be looking at increasing advisor numbers because of the time savings. So if you increase your numbers by 10%, that's about 30 positions, and that would be a good place for support staff that are no longer required typing through manual Word documents or the other difficult way to transition those from support to advisor. And the blue sky is anything you can imagine. You have the best data set, data that's previously been locked up in filing systems and insurer systems is now at your fingertips. So you can look at cross-marketing, develop an underwriting facility. You can search for which buildings over 5 million construction value have an element of timber. That information is all there. You can update data into your system from referrers. So property valuation companies, they're doing a market valuation, they're actually collecting a lot of information that would go towards insurance, or even if they're quantity surveying, and you develop a partnership with them, and I'm sure they'd love to see some of your clients to do valuations, and why wouldn't they show you some of your client data, and if it's sucked into your system, then that makes that all very smooth. This product is unique worldwide. Pricing. So our general pricing, it's software as a service and infrastructure as a service. It's not going to take up any room on your computer systems. It's all managed through Microsoft Azure with the up-to-the-minute security procedures. So if anything, it'll be more secure than any system that you've got. So the general release price, all you need is an internet connection and a computer. That's the only requirement. There's nothing to download. There's no infrastructure required apart from a tablet computer. The general release price, we're going to charge $25 per record per annum. So if an advisor's out there and does 4 interviews in a month, then at the end of the month they'll get a bill for $100. And compared to the time that they've saved, especially bearing in mind that they don't have to carry that information back into the office in paper form, they press save, let their assistant know that it's there, and they can get on with it. And we'll just cease charging if a record goes inactive. So if a record's not accessed for 12 months, we'll just stop billing, which means you don't have to delete prospects. They can sit there. You won't be charged for them, but maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, you reconnect. You can just go back into that record Once you access it, it becomes active again and we start billing, but you don't have to delete anything. So this is low maintenance. The blueprint link, we're going to charge $50 per month per user. Not every user is going to be turned on by the blueprint link, but if they are, then there's an additional cost and it will deliver leads. Myself, I've been in financial services for 30 years, so I've got some experience there, and Paul is a 10-year plus now developer who's worked with startup businesses and is the greatest application developer on the face of the planet as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much.